the real problem in biotech is we really don't know anything about biology. That's the scariest thing. If you look at probability of getting a drug approved, probability of success of getting a drug approved is like 8%. I use that as a corollary for how much biology we probably understand as a society.
This is the story behind the story. This is the human side of leadership in biotech. Willing to win. Biotech leaders against all odds.
My guest today is Karol Jarzabek. He left a job everyone told him was the dream. People still ask him why. He says he wants to be around the best people he can find, working on the things he cares about most. Because the years are not unlimited. He has one measure for his life. He decided as a kid that he would write the best story he could. And that he would have to write it with his own experiences. He's writing a good one. This episode will make you want a bigger problem. Karol, you came into a new country as a child with a very strict mother. I think you said that once. How did it shape you in a good and a bad way?
Yeah. So listen, my mom had it pretty tough, right? I think she had me when she was maybe like 22, 23. We immigrated to this country maybe 3 or 2 years later after I was born, or at least she did. My dad came first, my mom came second, and they pretty much left me with my godmother, who was, I think, 19 at the time, for like a year and a half, or maybe even 2 years. And so, coming to a new country, like my mom didn't speak the language to this day. She's pretty proficient now, but I mean, new world, new business, trying to figure out how to survive. My mom didn't necessarily know how to use the welfare state at that time. So like, it was all just like trying to figure out how to live off like your current cash flow. And my dad worked all the time, and he was a truck driver, so he was always gone. And so my mother had 2 roles. Right. And I was always this high-spirited, high-strung kid that had a little bit of OCD. And so like I was like highly compulsive, and once I got fascinated or fixated on a topic, whether it was being outside, playing with Legos, it's just like I could do that for hours and, kind of close out the world around me. And that kind of created me being a little bit of a pain point, because I never really followed the rules really well, even to this day, I'd say. And my poor mother just like ended up having to have like this uncontrollable force in her life a little bit, that she was just trying to like get discipline, maintain, and I wasn't easy to manage. And so like my mom always kind of said like she had to grind down my horns every once in a while, and it just made everything that much more curious in terms of how things were going to play out. And for a while there, it was like my mom and myself were kind of at odds. And a long time ago, I maybe like 15 years ago, I started realizing if it wasn't for her discipline and trying to like guide me in the right direction, I wouldn't be where I am today. And so, I think that some kids probably require a little bit more discipline, a little bit more focus, a little bit more of a stronger will to get them to act right, because if they don't, just like they could get off the rails pretty quickly. So very thankful for my mother in terms of everything that she did. It was pretty painful at certain times, but it was just a fantastic, where we're at today is just a fantastic experience.
How did she guide you in moments where you might have taken the wrong exit?
So in a lot of ways, she, we were growing up in the United States in the 90s. We were kind of latchkey kids. It means that you pretty much like, the door closed and door open, then you kind of walked in and out and had pretty much complete freedom. And my mom worked till about like 6 p.m. I got home from like school at like 3. And so I was just trying to do everything I can to like not do homework, not do anything. And so my mother sent me to tutors. She hired tutors. I went to Polish school every Saturday, so I didn't have my weekends. And so like it always felt like there was always something going on where my mom tried to get me like disciplined and focused structure all the time. And I'd say that over the years, as much as I never liked that, I realized that it's having a set schedule and very clear habits and sort of rituals is very powerful for me. Just because otherwise I'll just keep spinning and just keep doing the things that I want to do and forget about everything else and just like some things fall apart.
You also talked about not following the rules. Probably this is even more helpful right now than it is harmful. So tell me about that.
Yeah. So now following the rules, I'll tell you a story from high school. I was always a talker in class. You couldn't get me to shut up no matter how hard I tried. And I was in study hall where you have to stay quiet and study for the full 45 or 55 minutes, however long it was. And I would always just get in trouble with the teacher. And at one point, she's like, I'm going to either you stay quiet or we're going to have to like get you like truly send you to the principal's office and like truly have a disciplinary situation. I decided to pull up my chair next to her. And then I talked to her the rest of the year. And so that was just me like figuring out like there's like these sort of like immigrants sort of have like this way of like finding like certain loopholes to work with. It's like, I don't necessarily know how this works, but like you can find a way of being able to work around the problem. If you can't go through it, can't fix it, just like how can you get around it, right? And so, so funny enough, Becky Lee Carnes and I are still we still talk every once in a while after 20
Your teacher.
years. Yes. And she brings that moment up all the time. It's like, I couldn't get you to shut up. And then next thing you find out, you're just like, you decided to reverse engineer how you can keep talking without.
Many story.
So
I really liked it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I use that as like a sort of like an analogy for like everything else that I've kind of done in my life is like, I've had somewhat of a formal education, but a lot of things that I've tackled, challenges, roles, it's like I'm completely out of my depth in a lot of ways in terms of starting out. And one of the things that you have to have is, and I think this is a character trait, is you have to have this like conviction that you'll figure it out. And I may not know the answer, but I will do everything to get you the answer. And I'll be honest with my starting point, right? And I'd say that's pretty similar to sort of where where I am in my current role. iOrgan Bio as the COO, it's a robotics and AI company that does biology, and I don't have the depth in any one of those topics or any one of those subjects, domain disciplines to be able to hold a candle to the peers that I have in our company. But I'll tell you this much, I'll always figure it out. And the best thing you could always do is just ask a bunch of dumb questions. And so just being able to ask questions, learn, self-educate, and just figure things out is, I think, one of the most, like if you find that in a person, whether it's an employee, a friend, a partner, it really just gives you it shows you the level of how important adaptability is to different circumstances. And it's just a critical element that I think that whether you're born with it or you can develop it is something that everyone should focus on.
I think you tested and you proved that personality trait along your career. What I see is you started in of course, in consulting, then went to pharma, orphan drugs, came into private equity, and now at a startup that is a lot earlier than the other companies. There are a couple of questions running through my mind, but the first one is actually Azurity. That was the first bigger pharma company that you came to. Mm-hmm. You had to turn it around, shape it. What was the first thing you saw that others didn't? Talking about rules and maybe changing rules, but
yeah. So I joined Azurity when we were only $30 million of revenue, and I think there was only 40 employees. And 4 years from that point, we were at nearly $500 million and 400 employees. A lot of it was inorganic acquisition and some organic growth that we had. But I came in a director of operations role and responsible for continuous improvement. And I I I got connected with the company um, through consulting, and I was doing consulting projects in terms of trying to get their operation going. My claim to fame in terms of how I won favor with the CFO at that time, Ron Scarborough, who's now the CEO. And they were looking at potentially like go leasing another building because their kitting line was just like was under like it was through capacity. It's like they were just capacity constrained, and they just had to like, okay, we're going to go get another facility, build a new line, hire more people. In about like 3 weeks, I reverse engineered sort of like some of the challenges that the team was having in terms of trying to get the throughput going, and relatively quickly, well, by eliminating automation, funny enough, we were able to double the throughput, and so we didn't have to go get another building, get another facility, hire on more people. And I saved the companies. I did a lot of cost avoidance for the company. And at the same time, sort of built out and cleaned out most of the GMP space because they were also running out of warehouse space and pallet location space. And I discovered that like there was approximately like 40 or 50 pallet locations on the floor that could be freed up because they just weren't organized in the right way of being able to stage material as it goes in and out of certain work areas. And so, delivered for Ron a lot. And then at that point, just like I pretty much pitched my job of coming in and working for him because he was one of the best, he's one of the best executives I ever met. And he was a great educator. So like the moment that he saw you were a high potential, or even if you had, the ability to learn, he would dedicate his time and just like try and bring you up. And so he was just very highly informative in terms of where my progression happened and being able to take sort of like these disparate domain functions and capabilities and skills that I had and just like really help guide and consolidate them in this like really powerful general management approach. So with Ron, we then acquired Silvergate. We acquired Silvergate Pharmaceuticals. After that, we acquired a few products from Eaton Pharma, and then fundamentally we acquired Arbor Pharmaceuticals that was in Atlanta, Georgia, in 2022, I believe. And so, I mean, we grew real fast. I think now Azurity's nearly $1 billion revenue business, over 1,000 employees all across the world. And I mean, it's a great story to kind of be part of that journey and cycle. And so that's one of my favorite memories of my professional career is like the growth and the starting point.
There is a moment I think you mentioned it between the lines. There is a moment in a turnaround when you realize, oh, it's working. Did you feel that moment? Did you celebrate it, or how did you feel it afterwards?
So when I came into Azurity, like I fundamentally knew this was a company that I wanted to work for because it had the right foundations, right? I didn't really have like a clear understanding in terms of what are my investment criteria at that point or how I build an investment thesis. But I was able to pick up on trends and like certain key points that said like, this is a good business that has a lot of potential. And, I felt like I picked the right company to go and transition from. But with Azurity, it was a great business to start out with. It was when we acquired Arbor Pharmaceuticals that we had a generic portfolio of products that we never had before, and we had a lot of them. And so initially we thought about divesting out of them. However, like, if you look at the unit volume performance as well as the financial performance for that portfolio of assets, it did nothing but go down and to the right for 3 years. And so one of the things I told Ron is like, no one, and I said pretty much told Ron and the board, that no one's going to buy a falling knife. No one's going to try and catch a falling knife. Like they're all gonna kind of hose you in terms of like the purchase price and the relative value of the company or that portfolio of assets. And I said, the only way we're going to be able to go sell this thing is like, we have to stabilize the business and be able to project some kind of strength and future value. And so from that, I kind of started doing a bunch of investigation, looking at all the assets, the portfolio, understanding, the complexities of generic contracts that exist out there. And and which is a total web. If you if you ever dive deep into it, you just like, you realize how complex the U.S. pharmaceutical commercial space really is. And after doing about a month work of like diligence in terms of the entire business, pretty much made a pitch to Ron about like, I'm going to need to buy about $5 million worth of inventory for certain products, which I think have a high likelihood of being successful because either they're differentiated, there aren't too many market participants, you got the right gross margin profile, and like there's enough demand out there to justify sort of like taking a gamble. And started just building out a small little team. It was like a Skunks Works team. We had 4 people that were just pretty core to the team, and we were just constantly trying to clean things up. And one of the things that I realized that we were really far off from our pricing in relationship to the market. And I didn't have too much time because we started as soon as they gave me this portfolio of products, I had to start diligencing. I started getting diligence by potential buyers. And I mean, so that's maybe like a 3-month cycle. And I had to figure out how to turn it around. And one of the things that I did was I did like a relative sample assessment across different channels of customers, of picking prices and figuring out sort of like go high, go low, go medium across different products and ranges. And I realized that because you have such a big portfolio, so many SKUs and so many potential channels you could go to, you can really do a lot of experimentation really quickly. And so by being able to kind of like get clear benchmarks in terms of where do we get traction, where do we not get traction, someone asks for additional negotiation, I'm like, okay, I'm in the ballpark. And so that was the approach probably for the first three months of the business, is just trying to understand market price dynamics. And we didn't win a single thing the first round that we did it. Not a single one. But what we did is we got a lot of insight. But the second tranche in Q2 of that year, we got significant traction. So much so that the portfolio of assets that I'm talking about was probably generating just $20 million before we acquired the portfolio in general. And the moment that they gave it to me, I lost about a third of the business because of like products were up for negotiation. So now I have a business that's probably $12 million in revenue, generating negative EBITDA, and I have to go sell this, right? And no one wants to buy that. No one's going to buy that, right? And so after the first quarter of little to no success in terms of this experiment, the second quarter we hit big, and we were able to get back on our runway of delivering to the $27 or $26 million that I forecasted for in the very beginning. And now I believe that portfolio is generating over $100 million of net revenue for Azurity, right? And then there's like new products that were added. It's not just all all the work that I did. We also had a great team that came on and found a solid replacement for me because as soon as I was able to do that turnaround, my investors asked me to come work for them. And so we hired on Nate, who was leading that division for after I left, and he's done a fantastic job in terms of getting commercial traction with that portfolio.
In the beginning, you said didn't have a private life, didn't bother, right? It was not a big problem. Probably you wouldn't do the same thing right now.
No.
Your private life got more complex, I guess.
Yeah, no. Listen, I think that the reason why I took like you have to understand that like there's sometimes very few times in life you can get a win-win, right? A lot of times you can get trade-offs, right? growing up as an immigrant, trying to make it in the United States, post, 2008, where it was like anytime you got a job, you were lucky if you got one. I mean, you get like a little bit of everyone kind of had like the hustler cut, like the grinding culture. Everyone talked about how many hours they're working, and that was sort of like a way of being able to show that, like, hey, okay, I'm okay.
That was
Uh,
our time, yes.
that was our time, right? and and I did that for probably like 10 or so years, where I was just constantly grinding. And I realized that the fastest way that I could get to being able to pay off my student loans and be able to get like a solid footing is actually through consulting. Um, you know, I realized like I don't need any overhead. So I got rid of my house, got rid of my car. I literally lived in hotels, and yeah, you pay a price in terms of personal life. And, I got started in terms of, I got started in my mid 30s to try and find like a partner and all, and like get stable in like one community. But I wouldn't have had the success that I have today. And I'm not talking about the professional vocational side. My wife is the treasure of my life, and the community that I have here in Raleigh, as well as with her family, is the biggest gift. And I wouldn't have had it any other way, knowing what I know today. Right in the moment, it obviously it sucked, and it's very depressing. But it was a trade off that I decided to take. But it was a trade off that enabled me to do other things in the future. Right, it comes back down to like being able to figure things out, being adaptive. How can you stabilize in one point, grow in another, but some things are going to fall through the cracks. So that's.
What part was depressing?
I mean, 330 days in hotels. And it's a lot of times and at that time I had two of my own businesses. One was an export business and one was a consulting business. You're constantly just traveling, trying to get, working with clients, trying to figure out how you're going to, make payroll and pay some of your contractors, or how am I going to acquire enough like equipment to sell? And so you're constantly just like, I was just constantly traveling and trying to make it, right? But it taught me a lot of different things in terms of like being able to, when it comes down to more supply chain, like hardcore logistics, customer acquisition, figuring things out, not knowing anything, like building out like your own acumen in terms of QuickBooks, accounting, finance, even more so, understanding how tax structures work, because like now you're running a business, right? And so you got multiple sources of income. And so it was very educational. But it was at the same time just pretty depressing. It's like, cause you don't see your friends. Your closest friends are living their lives. Everyone's moving on. And you're like, I'm in the same hotel room. And sometimes you get a phone call, like, and you're in the middle of Canada. You answer it in Polish because you think you're in Warsaw. And next thing you find out, you're like, I got to fly to Dallas today. And like somehow, some way, it's like your brain is across too many geographies, trying to focus on too many different things. And a lot of times it's not sustainable. And I think the problem that I had back then is I really didn't know how to necessarily scale well. Growing up as an immigrant mentality is like, I can figure everything out. I can do everything. And that is not true, right? If you want to be able to unlock true, if you want to reduce your trade-offs, you need to accept lower margins and be able to take on higher expenses, right? And that's just how life goes. And the more that you know, and the more that you learn from your mistakes, because I'm an experiential learner, the more you can apply in the future.
That's an interesting part. So, exploratory mindsets in times of uncertainty. So you change companies afterwards. QHP Capital, private equity, the investor you said. Then you didn't have to change one company, but being the outsider, changing other companies. A lot of uncertainty. You wouldn't be able to control certain companies.
No. And here's the funny part, right? Because as an investor in the business, even if though you're operating as an operating partner or have the operational responsibilities, those companies, right? They don't have to listen to you. Those leaders don't have to listen to you. So you're constantly in this like sales cycle of like advising them to do the right thing or helping them see things that they don't see, and just like help them see around the corners, right? Um, and it's one of those things where it really just tells you how important strong management teams are. If you got a strong management team, you could just you know that you can sleep easy at night, not have to like look under every rock, or look over their shoulder all the time to know what they're doing. And I really wish that more investment committees, and it was much more acceptable to say like, hey, this is a strong founder or strong management team, and you build your investment thesis around that. And yes, the industry, the space, the CAGR, the growth, all that stuff is super important. But after you buy it, someone's going to have to run it, and you want people that are good to run it. And to make the assumption that you can always find the perfect team is pretty risky.
Let us dig deeper a little bit. As an outsider, as an investor, you said you have this sales approach. You have to have influence without having a real influence,
Mhm.
but you have an advising role. So I believe that sometimes you are being perceived as a threat to the people, depending on the relationship, depending on the personality of the other side. Did you experience that?
Of course.
Being the villain?
Of course. The joke that someone said is like, in our company is like, if Carl's working with you, it's not a good sign. Right. And that's, and I don't think it was always the case, but my partners didn't give me the easy work. Right. And that's how it should be. So being seen as somewhat of a threat or just like unknown factor, it's like, oh, he's going to call mom and dad kind of risk is always kind of present. But, it's all about how you deliver and how you gain, how you gain trust, I think is like one thing that matters most. I'd say that anyone that, if you start thinking about those individuals that are highly competent and highly intelligent, like they'll appreciate anyone that can help them out. It's like, it's a no-brainer. It's like, could you help me carry the load? Yes. Okay. And then I have no problem getting my hands dirty. You need me to go potentially do some business development. You need me to figure out like what's wrong with our sales funnel or our messaging that's like falling through. Yeah, we'll figure it out. Or from our financials or our operations, is our strategy right? Right. It doesn't matter. It's like, there's so many pieces. And back to the point of, you can't do it all yourself. You fundamentally need, if you have someone that's willing to help be in the trenches with you, I always see that as a positive thing. It's not always well perceived by others, but I think a lot of that kind of comes down to, the human factor of, ego taking a part in everything that we do. And you can't discount that in business or interpersonal relationships. It's, or even in castle politics, right? Just like there's like certain level of ego. And one of the things that I truly appreciate is are individuals that have like a certain level of ego death. Like, I'm not the best person. I don't know everything, right? And I am willing to get help from anyone that can help me out. I love working with those folks because there's a certain degree of authenticity where it's in a world where everyone's got their shields up and trying to show off perfection at all times. You realize that that's a lot of cycles to dedicate when we all know that it's impossible to know everything and be perfect.
When did it change on your end?
Oh, when did it change? What, me trying to be perfect?
Trying to keep your ego up.
Oh, so that one's actually pretty easy. One of the things that you kind of asked me, I think when we last met was, what was like one of the hardest things that you had to deal with that you don't talk about in the business world, right? And I mean the reality, the like at its core, I have made it a very big part of my life to be as authentic as I can be ever since I was a kid. I didn't want to change. I didn't want to necessarily adapt too much back to like, teachers and mom, and like it didn't want to necessarily change too much. I really like my authentic self. And because it's playful, it's fun, it's hardworking, it's pressing. I want to build meaningful relationships with people. And so I looked at most of those things as being relatively good. But in the world where everyone's like putting up like a perfect shade of themselves, uh, you know, no one really wants to bring down their barriers or their walls. And so for me, I made it pretty, it was always a very intentional thing for me to be as authentic as I could be. And a lot of times it didn't necessarily work out well, especially in my early career. Everyone was like, "Oh man, this guy's got too much energy. Like, what's he going? Like, why is he trying so hard?" But at its core, it's like who I was. And the funny part is like people that kind of like were like I would were kind of dismissive of me at first, really ended up connecting with me over time. And that's the main reason why I still talk to like Becky Lee Carnes over there
They
in
remember you.
Illinois,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And the same thing with I mean I've got so many. I mean, Rob Yates from my days at Bosch, my first job after school. It's like him and I still chit chat from time to time. And he was one, and he'll tell you that when he first met me, he thought like, man, this kid's a little bit too much. He dismissed me, and then over time, we just built this great friendship together. And I'm one of those like ride or die people. Like most of my friends I've had for like 20 or 30 years. It's like I still try and stay like close to the people that I've made these relationships with. And what allows you to continue that spectrum over time is a certain degree of authenticity. And you got to keep it. And for anyone that's like trying to be something that they're not, eventually it falls apart. It's just a matter of time. So the more you could be relatively true to yourself, it's like you're not putting in the cycles. Don't get me wrong, you have to improve. You have to be improved. You can't be like a complete narcissist, right? Or there are certain things that just like you got to watch out for. But at its core is like by being just a good person that chooses to be great, that chooses to be kind, that chooses to be helpful, and at the same time, just like just trying to be relatively positive. Man, like that is something you want to keep those traits regardless of who you are, right? And so and regardless of whether or not it got me burned or when I was just like a little and when I was young when I was younger and I was a little bit more too comedic at times, like it would burn me a little bit, but like the older I get, it's like I've found a way of being able to differentiate myself at all times. And I don't have to pretend to be someone I'm not. And I think that is just like that's a major weight off anyone's chest.
For example, scientific founders, biotech company scientific founders, their ego is attached to their identity.
Mm.
The science is attached to their identity. If someone would say something about the science, they would, of course, take it more personal than in any other role. So talking about identity, I think it's different in what you created.
Yeah, yeah, and it kind of comes down to I don't know if you can apply like first principles to personality, right? But if you kind of your personality in some way is kind of somewhat dictated from your birth. You can adjust on the fringes a little bit, but very few people can change who they are fundamentally. You don't have too many examples of that, right? But when you do, it's these amazing stories that you hear. But when it comes down to like scientists, I mean, the hardest thing that I find with people that have like a truly like a big scientific like a lot of domain experience in terms of science. It's you've gone really deep into one core topic. Usually, right? Whether it's like the branch of biology, but the moment you go down biology, there's like others like smaller tranches that you go down, and then you build like certain expertise, right? Um, and you normally try, and very much like doctors, you're kind of within the same ecosystem at all times, and so you don't necessarily get too many points out. And I think that the hardest thing that I think that a lot of scientists actually have is, to your question about value. If you can't either communicate the value of what you're working on effectively to others, or what, or the, or understand the relative value converted into a monetary point, I think it's very hard to, it's very hard not to be kind of rooted in some degree of ego to your ideas, right? I'll give you an example, right? I always tell like a lot of scientific founders that if someone offers you a stupid amount of money for what you're working on, just say yes, sell. I think a lot of people that are like scientific founders overvalue what they build, or what the market perception is what they build. And what ends up happening is they'll say no. They'll get another offer. They'll say no again because it's not enough in terms of what they perceive it to be. And then eventually money stops coming. They run out of funds and the idea goes away, right? And then it gets acquired through legal means, right? Or goes back out in the market. And I think that's just like sort of like a sad tale, because like I the for someone who's built something with their craft, I think that because when it comes down to the space of pharma, I mean, you're talking about these long development cycles. Like, right, some products take literally 26 years to make. It takes longer to make a pharmaceutical product than it takes to get an F-35 up into the air. Like, you don't really have like this appreciation of what the relative value is, because it's the world's worst casino. 26 years to find out that like, hey, you know what, we're going to take all your money away is like a crazy notion that you've like of failure, right? And so I think it's like partially is because you don't have routine exits in this space. You have either a winner takes all or nothing else. I mean, it is so bimodal of a distribution. Either you have like these like billion-dollar transactions that are in the news, or you have like when another company went bankrupt, right? Or got acquired on pennies on the dollar, right? And there's nothing in the middle like you have with like a lot of these other businesses that are out there, or like a lot of these other industries. And I think that is fundamentally one of the challenges that I think that like scientists end up having in terms of miscalculating or misrepresenting the value of what they're working on. Because, I mean, no one really understands the compounding effects of risk and potential probabilities of failure year in, year out on a cash investment basis. None of these products in our pharmaceutical industries have positive IRR or have positive NPV. It's like, that's the crazy thing that like most consumers don't understand in the United States as like they attack the pharmaceutical industry is like none of these things are relatively profitable on a cash basis in terms of investment, right? They'll just see that like a product is making $10 billion, $12 billion a year, right? But they don't really know that they had to spend $40 billion to get it approved because of like all the other products that they had to work on just to get it approved, just to get that dollar amount of magnitude, right? And so it's like, it's one of these like interesting things that like, that if you don't look into the numbers, it's like it's very hard to be sympathetic to pharmaceutical companies. And I get that.
What's the problem actually with biotech?
The real problem in biotech is we really don't know anything about biology. That's the scariest thing. If you look at probability of getting a drug approved, probability of success of getting a drug approved is like 8%. I use that as a corollary for how much biology we probably understand as a society, like as a civilization. It's like 8%. And I would say the number is lower.
8%?
Yeah. I mean, that's like the likelihood of getting a drug approved. So if you put 100 drugs into clinical trials, only 8 of them will get approved, kind of thing, right? But we look at biology, at least from a human biology perspective, as health is neutral, right? Being healthy, not having any issues is a neutral position. There's more above that, right? Especially now that you're talking about neurotropics and peptides and like now and the world's getting crazier in terms of like potentially human enhancement, all that stuff. It's like there's more to discover about biology than we understand. But in terms of like, we probably know about 8% to get us to healthy. And the reason for that is if you look at the people that are driving most of the innovation in our space, our best and brightest minds, right? These poor biologists, these PhDs are doing wet lab work 75% of their time, pipetting, moving things around, playing around with shakers. And all of it, what they don't tell you is most of it's rework. The moment I discovered that, I'm like, what a misallocation of human capital. Think about that, Christian. Most of the growth that we've had in GDPs and civilizations across countries and across time has really been about unlocking human capital, right? And so so if you start thinking about where our best and brightest are at, they're spending 75% of their time doing rework, trying to move biology forward, discover how it works and it operates. Some experiments take 3 to 6 months, maybe longer. You add the rework, by the time you get a successful outcome, 2-3 years. Okay, now I got something I can work with. Cool, right? And the terrifying part about that is like, it's like that misallocation of human capital is really the root cause of why we know so little. And the more that persists, the lower likelihood we have is of actually changing, let's say flipping the script in terms of turning this industry of which is a casino into something that's predictable, right? Think about SpaceX and the space industry. Like using engineering, CAD, all these fundamentals that they've built out on over 100 years of the Industrial Revolution and before that, they've been able to like unlock and build rockets, right? Again, do they experiment, but do they go up in the air first time? Maybe, but they fundamentally work. Like they can get to a certain level of precision on their version 1s that gets you to a point of like, this is possible. In biology, we ain't got that. We don't know how the cells behave in real time because they're self-organizing, they're finicky, if they're not in the wrong environment, the wrong humidity, temperature, you don't shake it enough, right? And maybe you're not telling it that you love them enough. I have no idea. Like there's so many different variables that go into it that you start asking the question is like, okay, so what drives biology? And we have hypotheses, we have ideas, but at its core, we know very little. Very little. And I think that biology, as much as everyone's like really like hooked on like, space exploration, total addressable market, all these investments going into SpaceX and rocket companies. And trust me, I think that's wonderful. But I think the TAM for biology is larger because the moment you get to another planet, question is, how can you have biology be there? Whether it's plants, animals, humans, right?
So what happens when you go from 8%, let's say, to 20?
Ooh, so back to that probability of success for drugs getting approved is 8%. If we here at iOrgan Bio, because like we're using robots and AI to do cell differentiation. I talked a little bit about the pain point about biologists not being a misallocated human capital. We're using robots and AI to unlock that time for them. So they're focusing much more on the design of experiments and being able to focus on assessment of what to do next with the biology, while having the robots and the AI do most of the heavy lift and most of the lift right there. And at the core, what we use is single cell transcriptomics, right? It's probably one of the most data rich insights you could get in terms of the state of cells. And our cycle times from like collecting samples, library prep, sequencing, all the way through analysis is a little bit over 24 hours, which is world class. No, I don't think any single industry any single company has that ability. And what we've done is fundamentally build a engine that unlocks our data acquisition of what's happening to biology in real time to something that we at iOrgan Bio believe we can get to 20% as quickly as we can. And what happens at 20%? I think in 2023, the top 20 pharma companies spent about $145 billion on R&D. And that reflects the 8% probability of success. So that means 92% failures are going, 92% of those items that are coming out of that will go into failures, right? If you had something that understood biology, just like you were able to raise that probability of success to 20%, you would fundamentally have that same run rate of $145 billion generating 2.5 times as many drugs. Or you can deliver the current number of drugs at $57 billion, right? And so there's this wealth of opportunity that you can fundamentally change the unit economics of pharmaceuticals just by being able to make it predictive. I mean, the way that we go about drug discovery is fundamentally guess and check. Let's guess and check whether or not this drug is going to be efficacious and safe. And we have all these controls, we have all these factors, clinical trials, preclinical animal testing, it's you name it, that are there to kind of help guide you along that guess and checking. But at its core, if you were able to make something that's much more of a predictive, you change biology into a controls problem, and you have predictable outcomes. At its core, you now fundamentally change the entire game of how the unit economics work in pharma.
I also believe that we would have a lot less biotech companies at all, because people wouldn't go on the journey if they knew much earlier that this isn't going to work.
I would say that you'd actually have more.
You'd have more.
You'd have more, right? I mean, it's just like one of those. It's like one of those interesting points where, like back in the day when we used to have like hand looms, right? Everyone immediately thought that like, okay, I'll be able to deliver more goods at a higher price. But what happened? The consumer benefited. The people that were working on looms were kind of like a little bit the losers, but you ended up having all of these different new players that existed, right? Like the clothing industry is like significantly larger because it's able to satisfy more demand. So if you were able to have a much more of a predictive, like if you had more predictive outcomes, you would have better capital efficiency, right? That's I think what you would have, but you would have more biotech companies, because the more you understand about biology, I mean, it's almost in an infinite space on where it can go, right? Not only in terms of just like human health, but animal health, plant health, gain of function of our character traits, and when you start taking it like one step further, it's like, what if you were able to start using biology for material applications, right? So everyone's talking about these data centers, right? 1 gigawatt is very expensive to purchase these days. But like your brain has more compute than most data centers, and it operates on 10 watts, right? It's like this is one of the most effective transistors that we have. And if so, like down the road, I wouldn't be surprised that you end up having this symbiotic relationship between material science and biology to be able to go, drive better levels of efficiency. I think there'd be more biotech companies. I really do.
Interesting. I just think about the invention of email created more paper demand than.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't know that.
One important question that I have here is, you went to iOrgan Bio after all your time in private equity. Why?
Man, that one, back when I was a consultant, I met a bunch of PE guys and I'm like, I want to be a PE guy. Right. And at its core, the times that I felt happiest was when I was actually building companies. Not when I was advising, not when I was consulting. It was when I was driving some value, right? Through my team, through myself, it didn't matter. So when I got into PE, it's like I just knew deep down inside that this is probably not my place. That's one. Like being relatively honest with yourself and knowing that is pretty important, right? Back to being somewhat authentic, right? You want to be as authentic to yourself as possible because it's just easier to live.
But you wanted it.
You don't know until you try sometimes, right? And a lot of times it was a cool gig. It's like I am very thankful for a time I had in PE. I want to make that super clear. It was such a great education just because we were all in the pharma services space, everything from end to end. So you had CDMO, CRO, post-commercialization, patient support companies, and constantly looking at the full value chain of pharma and like seeing how all of it works. I mean, I went from oil and gas and aerospace to Azurity as pharmaceuticals as like my first pharma gig, 4 years. Had to learn a lot. Complete novice. I had no idea how like some of these pharma services industries work or just like those core competencies that build into pharma operate. So being able to see that entire swath was very helpful in terms of being able to understand how do you build the right investment theses? How do you realize value of something? Like the beauty about it is like I now know like gross margins for most industries, so it's easy to negotiate. I know what the levers are, right? I know what the market dynamics are, what the strategies are, where they think their growth is going to be at. That's pretty powerful, especially now we talk about like customer acquisition. Here at iOrgan Bio is like, it's like that helps guide me because like now I'm an expert in the space that like understands the strategic levers that they're trying to unlock, pull on, and hopefully it'll just generate more share. iOrgan Bio is me learning the hard stuff that I was never going to get a chance. Biology, the importance of R&D, understanding how that engine works. Right now, we're still like very much in R&D phase. We have commercial traction, but there's still so much that I have to learn to be effective in my role. And that is super powerful in terms of being able to build a comprehensive package, right? Like I am at core a general manager at heart, right? I just know that I'm just like, I'm an operator and I'm working on filling out the deficiencies because I fell in love with the space, right? And figuring out how to fix this industry is like one of my biggest drivers is because when I was putting together these damn financial models for whether or not we buy or build a product, I remember when I started looking at this stuff, I'm like, I'm getting thousands of data points from regulatory, clinical, R&D, tech transfer, operations, quality, and I have to consolidate it into one number, right? And I know that no one in this industry knows everything. And I also know that from my own personal experiences, like I have made mistakes in terms of assessment, perspectives, not knowing enough. And so, there's a certain level of error in anything that you're receiving and that you're trying to put down into a number. And that for me was like, I'm like, oh, if you could figure out how to solve this problem in our industry, that's, you change the game for a lot of people, right? And you push biology and human health forward. And because you can get the unit economic, you can make capital markets more efficient here in terms of being able to generate a return. Those savings, that efficiency eventually gets passed down to consumers, right, to patients. And so joining iOrgan Bio was me really trying to pursue something that was, I want to get the early stage startup milestone box checked. I want to help build something, do R&D, do biology. It's also tied to something that I fundamentally am so passionate about like figuring out how, like truly being able to have a better understanding of biology. Being able to have a clear picture of biology benefits everybody. And, I have no idea if we're going to be able to deliver the perfect view, but like, I mean, if we can just get it to 20%, you change the lives of a lot of people. And, that is sort of like my mission, my goal here at iOrgan Bio. And I mean, one of the easiest criteria for me making that decision was actually our founder, Daniel Delubach. He's probably one of the smartest people I've ever met, and probably one of the best like operators I've met too. I mean, I mean, it's been a humbling experience working with the guy. And that is something that like not a lot of people have. Like, I think that a lot of people would look at that and say, man, you could have gotten like a CEO role someplace and like, or stayed in PE, which everybody says like, why the hell did you ever leave my dream job to me all the time? And I'm like, listen, I just want to be surrounded by the best possible people that have like the same vision and mission I have. It's like the older you get, like you have less time on this world, and the less time you have on this world, like a few more bucks isn't going to make or break it, right? What's going to make or break it for me, and I think everyone's values are very different. But back to being authentic, one of the things that I really wanted was a life goal of mine ever since I was a kid is I want to write the best story I can. I want the best story that I can possibly write. And and I have to write it with my experiences, right? And so I am looking for what's going to have the best story, the best cliffhangers, the best peaks and troughs, and just you name it, right? And I'd say that is my motivator in pursuing self-actualization as a human being.
Love that. And to end on, what is something that you are determined to avoid at all costs?
I met my wife relatively late in life. I want to be able to spend as much time as I can with her, right? And so for me, it's like being able to have eventually the right balance is important, right? But more so than that is, she's got a family history of Alzheimer's. And so, the saddest thing that I could think of is, if my time gets short with her personality, right? And so the work that I'm doing at its core is there to also enable her longevity and her health. So we get more time together, right? So that's like the one thing that would be the biggest low point, is not being able to help her with that. And like the best one would be that, I help enable her health, but at the same time, help enable her health and her longevity in lives, because she's an incredible person. So from a personal side, that's that. From a professional side, I would say, from a professional side, I think I think that the next goal for me is really just working much more with legislators to really help not unravel, but maybe address some of the challenges that we have in the regulatory space with trying to get drugs approved, and how can we make things run smoother not only from a drug discovery and drug approval basis, but as well as from a commercial basis. That's I think the next big stage that I'll be eventually working on. And if I can help unlock that, then, it's an industry. This is an industry that I love, and I find it super complicated. And it's like you're playing around for Rubik's Cube all the time. And because you're dealing with people's health, it's always personal.
That went to my heart. Thank you very much for this conversation, Karol.
Thank you, Christian. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much for hosting me on your podcast.
No, thank you. All the best. Willing to Win. Biotech Leaders Against All Odds. A podcast with biotech leaders for biotech leaders. Stories about conviction. The good, the bad, the ugly.